I want to start with this. You wrote a book last year called The Technological Republic, and you quote Samuel Huntington in it, that argues the following, argues that the rise of the West was not made possible, quote, by the superiority of its ideas or values or religion, but rather by its superiority in applying organized violence. What do you mean by that? And is that what Palantir ultimately does?
Well, I think one of the most interesting about that quote is it's indisputably and obviously true.
And you genuinely believe that the U.S., this idea of ideas, values, religion has nothing to do with it? You think it really is about organizing violence?
No. Sorry, I didn't say that our ideas aren't important. Obviously, I come from an academic family, and I was planning to be an academic before I realized it was worthless and I'd be better at building things. But
we should talk about that too.
But one of the biggest problems we have in our elite institutions, especially our Ivy Leagues, is this indisputable truth that no one would listen to the superiority of our ideas if our ability to organize in violence was inferior. That every single person in the world believes, outside of the faculty of Harvard, and certainly all of our adversaries know to be true, is viewed as something that's kind of worthy of great discussion and dispute. And the primary reason they dispute it, honestly, is because at their core, they want to undermine the superiority of Western values, which are meritocracy, rule of law, accepting that inputs and outputs are not the same, that are the basis of building the superiority on the military plane.
You think that the university culture is trying to undermine that?
Well, I think it's moved from the 50s, where it was trying to explain why our Constitution is the best way to organize our lives, not others, why meritocracy is necessary, even if it means letting in immigrants to your institution, why inputs and outputs aren't the same, why the First, Second, Third, Fourth Amendment are unique, and why it was worth standing up for these values, has literally been transformed, especially in the humanities departments too. Of course, none of that could work because no one like us is good at doing that, basically. I mean, that's like, and therefore the whole thing couldn't work. And downstream of that is enormous dysfunction, and you see this in all sorts of issues. Our primary and most important adversary, I say adversary consciously and not enemy, is China. And we will decide, AI and the ability to implement it on the battlefield primarily will decide the values, i.e. the norms, the laws, and the spirit of the laws that are imposed upon us across the globe. And if you think for a minute they believe anything that we're being taught in our idiotic faculty, you are even more idiotic than the professors teaching it. And I'll tell you, if you actually believe in these values, again, I'm not a neocon, I never was. That's why I'm skeptical of immigration, because I don't think all this cultural assimilation hasn't worked in the last 50 years, and that's an obvious truth you're also not allowed to say. I'm skeptical of imposing values on other people. I never believed we should or try to make the Arab Middle East, Wilsonian people, like a Wilsonian ideal imposed upon them. If you believe for a second that anyone else outside this country believes that we are going to defend our values without superiority and moral violence, you're just living in a world that doesn't exist.